pink glaze. Okay, so we got this strawberry pink texture, right? And this was actually captured by literally pouring a bunch. If you don't have too many things that are like, you know, extremely. So that's not very useful in this format, like 0 to just like white light around the plane, but it won't of sunlight. Anyways, so that's pretty good. And then I might grab my, oh yeah, I got to fix this again. Let's make that back what it was. Let's move that back. Get a few more blues in there. Bit of pinks, bit of whites, bit of yellows. I'm going to make my icing as well a little bit hotter and down. So this is in the textures free category. But like through a little bit shiny if you look at references. So a little bit shiny. And then the other thing it really needs, and this does make a big difference, is subsurface scattering. So just like before, dragging down on that radius to make them all 1. And then I'm increasing the weight to be 1. And then I just drop this scale to be something really low. But that will make a big difference. Before I was like practicing for this video, and I was like, why are my sprinkles just not looking good? They weren't looking as good as, you know, a previous render I'd done. And I forgot subsurface scattering. And it does make a huge difference. So there we go. We've got a nice looking donut. Before you go ahead, what I'd like you to do is to try to create your own style of donut. You could try substituting is fun, just inject it into it. And it'll also just kind of teach you to kind of think independently and like, where is this thing, and locate that. And it's, you know, just a way of like bringing back that information. And also as your homework, add some sprinkles to your plate if you want. I won't show you how to do it because it's basically the same steps as before, scattering on surface. The only thing I'll mention is that you do need to apply your solidify modifier so that you can actually paint on the correct side of your plate and they will appear as long as that's done. But it's super simple, so I trust you all be able to do that. Anyways, that's it for this video. Join me in the next part, the final part, as we do the lighting and rendering. Welcome to your final serving of donut. In this part, we are going to be lighting, rendering, and making our donut actually look good. The final piece of the puzzle, which is the most fun, honestly, because currently it just kind of looks like a early 90s test render or something. Very, very bland. So let's make this actually look good. We're going to be moving around some stuff, and you can see that if you like move an object, you always leave behind something, right? And this is just annoying to deal with. So to fix this, you parent things to other things. So for example, if you want the icing to be connected to the donut, then you first select the icing, you shift select the donut, then you hit Control P to parent. And you can parent to the object or object keep transform. I always choose keep transform. Otherwise it can like clear the original location and you kind of lose its location. So always keep transform. And so there you go. So now when we move the donut, the icing is going with it. Importantly, you'll notice that in the outliner, you can't see the icing anymore. The icing has gone. Where is it? And this can be confusing sometimes. You're like, where's that object? And it's because it's parented to the donut. So it's now underneath in this little drop down here. It's in there. It's also a good idea to use like what is connected to what as a hierarchy. So for example, the donut is connected to the plate. So I'm now going to select the donut, shift select the plate, Control P, keep transform. And so now I can move the donut with the icing by itself or the plate with the donut. I'm going to do the same thing for the foam on top of the mug. Control P, keep transform. And then also the plate and the cup, I'm going to parent to the plane, the table. I'm going to say keep transform. So now all of our objects are in here, right? They're all parented and, they're all found underneath this. So we got to make sure that it's actually named correctly. So I'll call that table. This is going to be called plate. And I think we're good. Okay. Excellent. Now I've actually got two. Lamps in mine. Most of you don't. You've just got the one, so I'll just delete that. But yeah, let's go into lighting, the fun bit, actually making this look cool. Lamps in mine. Most of you don't. You've just got the one, so I'll just delete that. But yeah, let's go into lighting, the fun bit, actually making this look cool. Okay, so we want this to look like a sunlit cafe, at least I've actually got two, they're all, so I'm going to P, keep transform, and then also the plate and the cup, I'm going to parent to the plane, the table. I'm going to say keep transform. So now all of our objects are in here. Right? They're all parented and, they're all found underneath this. So we got to make sure that it's actually named correctly. So I'll call that table. This is going to be called plate. And I think we're good. Okay. Excellent. Now I've actually got two lamps in mine. Most of you don't. You've just got the one, so I'll just delete that. But yeah, let's go into lighting, the fun bit, actually making this look cool. Okay, so we want this to look like a sunlit cafe, at least I do. You're welcome to do whatever you want, but if you want to play along, that's what we're doing. So with our lamp here selected, you can see that we've got a number of different types here. We've got point, sun, spot, and area. I generally usually just use between point and sun. Occasionally a spot lamp if I just want to like focus on one specific thing, but I rarely use an area lamp because there's not much difference between that and a point lamp with a radius, essentially, like making it larger. I usually just use between point and sun. Occasionally a spot lamp if I just want to like focus on one specific thing, but I rarely use an area lamp because there's not much difference between that and a point lamp with a radius, essentially, like making it larger. But in our case, we want to look like a sunlit, so I'm going to check sun. And oh boy, we've got a nuclear blast of sunlight. So generally I keep this around 10, because that's actually what it like maxes out at when you just like drag it over. It comes in at 10. So that's about what we'll use. I also changed the temperature, which is, I think it was 4.5 they introduced this. But yeah, you can now adjust this. So this is a black body scale. So like the closer, like the lower this Kelvin scale is, the more it's like fire and like, you know, incandescent bulb, and then like warm LED, and then you can get to like skylight, and you can go all the way and it's just like crazy blue. But anyways, so sunlight, you know, until it looks right to you. I don't know, something that's a bit too much. Let's go. Oh boy, I don't even know now. I feel like I was just twisting that too much. Now I'm not actually sure what looks like sunlight. Anyways, good thing is we can change it later if we want to. Now, the interesting thing about a sun lamp is it doesn't actually matter where it is positioned. You can see if I position this close to my donut or my thing, like nothing happens. Whereas a point lamp, obviously, is very largely dependent on its location, because there is the inverse square law where like light falls off at, what is it, 4 times for every doubling of distance, so a huge sharp fall off. But sun, because it's so far away, there's no fall off, and so it doesn't matter where it actually is. So the only thing that matters with sun is the rotation of it, right? So I'm just going to rotate that to look like early morning sunshine, right? Because it's going to, you know, trying to tell a story with a donut, it's challenging, but we're trying. So early morning, somebody's got their coffee in a cafe or something. That's what we're going with. Oh, look at that. My mug is just slightly off the table. And now it is not. Excellent. Now, this by itself is pretty boring, right? If you were to do a render of this, which you can do just by hitting F12, right? It's okay, but it's like, this feels too naked, right? It's just being blasted with light everywhere. It helps to try to shape it and kind of highlight what is important, which is these two elements. The rest of the scene, that can just, yeah, it's not important to us, right? So we can throw that into shadow. And it's also an opportunity to make it look like there's a scene outside of the view there, which you can do by casting shadows into the scene. So I want to basically set up 2 blockers to make it look like this is shining in through a window. And as is typical with 3D, you don't have to model the windows because we're not looking at them. They can just be blockers. So I'm going to hit Shift A, and for my blocker, I'm going to use a plane. Okay, so it brings in this. I'm going to move it over there. I'm going to go R and then X, holding down Control until it says 90 at the top of the screen there. Do a single click. All right, that is my first blocker. And then I need another blocker going this way. So I'm going to have like a slither of light going across there. So Shift D, move this to, oh boy, Y, then X, R, Z to rotate it by 90 degrees. And then here we go. Dun-dun-dun-dun. Like that. All right. And then I'll move this one over a little bit. Maybe just make it a little bit bigger. Okay. To just try to shape it, to just get some of that light to be a little bit more targeted. I'm also going to move this mug just further in the back. So I'm going to hit G, And yeah, if you want to lock something to a specific act, like I want to move it along the X and the Y, but not the Z. We talked about this with scale, but it applies for everything. So if I hit G and then Shift Z, it'll move it along the X and the Y, but not the Z. And so this is an easy way of, like, you know that it's touching the ground where it needs to, but you just need to move it around. You can quickly move things by G and then Shift Z, and it'll move it around the plane, but it won't lift it off of the table, which is useful. And then I'll move my plate over like so. And yeah, that looks okay. All right, now, yeah, like I said, this looks okay, but it also looks kind of a little bit like film noir, right? And what does film noir look like? It looks fake, looks very like curated and designed in a comic strip, right? And the big telltale for that is like we've got almost complete darkness over here, right? And the real world is not like that. If this was a cafe, you would have things bouncing off other objects to the left-hand side outside of frame. But not only that, this is a sunrise. It's not happening on Mars or anything like that. So the sky is blue, generally speaking. So there needs to be some blue light as well. So what I'm going to do is, oh, look at this. We've got our blockers and yeah, let's actually move my light and my blockers. So shift selecting those. I'm going to hit M and I'm going to create a new collection and I'm going to call this lighting. And then we can call these two objects. By the way, if you want to rename two objects at once, you can do it by, I was just trying to remember the hotkey there. There you go. It's Control F2, which is the same hotkey, I think. Actually, no, I don't think it is in Windows. But anyways, Control F2, and then you can just say find and replace, or you can just say set name, and then you can say new, and I can just call this blockers or blocker, and then just say okay. There you go. It's Control F2, which is the same hotkey, I think. Actually, no, I don't think it is in Windows. But anyways, Control F2, and then you can just say find and replace, or you can just say set name, and then you can say new, and I can just call this blockers or blocker, and then just say okay. And there we go. It's call it blocker, and then the other one blocker.001. Okay, cool. So now, as I said, I want to create some sky lighting. So I'm going to add a new lamp, or I could duplicate the sun. I'll just duplicate the sun. So I'll move this over to there. And I'm now going to hide, I'll call this one sun, right, my original one. And then this new one, I'm going to call sky. And I'm going to change this to be a point lamp like this. And now I'm going to disable the sky. And this is actually a good tip to do. It's a really bad trap that a lot of beginners do is when they're working with lighting, they end up just kind of like throwing in lights, but you have to work in isolation. You should only be looking at each light separately to understand what purpose it actually has on the scene. So hiding my sun lamp, I'm going to position this up high because the sky is high, even though there would be like a window there. Something about, actually, let's just see the scale in relation to, get real mathematical here. The scale of the donut in relation to how tall would the window be? Maybe up to about here, I don't know. About there, let's say. And let's move it over a little bit. Okay. And then let's increase this. Let's remove the tint. And instead I'm going to make this, like you can actually like keep the tint, right? And make it go like all the way to that. But I want to have a little bit more control over it. I might want to make it look a little more purplish, or, you know, we're not going for something entirely photorealistic. We're going for like exaggerated realism, which can often look way better than real realism. So this, you can see this is a soft color. This is like moonlighting, but it just needs to be a little bit, just so that there's the hint that there is skylighting along with the sun. Now, the other big factor that it's missing is that the skylighting is not casting shadows like this, right? If the sun was away and it was just being lit by the sun, like think of like an overcast day, right? The sky itself, the entire dome is the size of the light. So the radius of our lamp here needs to increase, right? By a lot. Now, this is a very underused value. Like it's one of the most important values when it comes to lighting is the radius of something, because it's the softness of the shadow. As an example, let's just bring this in, or actually, hang on, let's just increase this so we can actually see it. So what can I do? Exposure. There. All right, so this is like the default, it comes in like this, okay? And you can see how harsh those shadows are. So as a rule, harsh shadow is very good at revealing detail. So we often use it a lot at Polygon because we need to show the detail of textures along a surface. So if you, this is like the default, it comes in like this, okay? And you can see how harsh those shadows are. So as a rule, harsh shadow is very good at revealing detail. So we often use it a lot at Polygon because we need to show the detail of textures along a surface. So if you want to highlight the sprinkles or something like that, you would use a very small radius like this, so it's really sharp shadows. Whereas if you want to reveal more of the form and just the overall color of a surface, that is when you would use a larger radius, right, as a general rule. And it has a huge impact on lighting. The other big thing is distance. So there's, I mentioned briefly, the inverse square law. A lot of beginners, you know, they're going like, oh, it's like skylighting. You want to reveal more of the form and just the overall color of a surface, that is when you would use a larger radius, right, as a general rule. And it has a huge impact on lighting. The other big thing is distance. So there's, I mentioned briefly, the inverse square law. A lot of beginners, you know, they're going like, oh, it's like skylighting. I'll just position the lamp up here, right? The problem with that is because of the inverse square law, every doubling of distance, so from like here to here, right, is going to, well, hang on, from here to here, what am I thinking of? But basically, like from the mug to the end of the donut, it could lose something like a third of its energy. It's just an, what do you call it? It's not something that is obvious, but it is really, really important. So if something needs to be far away or appear to be far away, you got to try to make it look really far away, basically. So, you know, something up in the air, basically. All right, let's clear that and let's increase it and go back to the radius. So nice, large radius in the sky. You know, it's not as big as the sky actually is, but, you know, something like that. So we've got smooth lighting over everything. And now with my sun, haha, look at that. We've got the tinge of blue lighting in the air, but we have the lovely hot, warm sun coming through as well. All right, the final lamp that I need is that bounce lighting for the rest of the cafe. So I'm going to duplicate my skylighting there. And I'm going to position this. I mean, you know, what's the height of the ceiling, or what is it even bouncing off? Who knows? There could be a wall here and it's bouncing off that. This is more where you get to control, you know, what is it that you're actually doing. So again, I'm going to hide my sky, hide my sun. So I'm just looking at this bounce lighting coming off the wall. And I'm going to clear this to make it look just like white light. And by the way, if you want to change something to the default value, just mousing over a color here, just hit backspace and now it goes to its default value. I can also backspace on the power light. And I'm going to clear this to make it look just like white light. And by the way, if you want to change something to the default value, just mousing over a color here, just hit backspace and now it goes to its default value. I can also backspace on the power and it goes to its default value of 10. So that's a handy one to know. And again, I will, Yeah, I mean, I can have a little bit of control over this because there could actually be a lamp off in the distance there. We don't really have a lot of rules for this bounce one. I'm just looking at trying to fill in the darkness there, right there. Because without it, and we'll call this indoor bounce, right? If you don't have it, it just looks too dark. So there needs to be something there just to fill in this area of our donut, all right? So that's what I'm looking at there. Something about that. Let's look at it from the camera view. And I think now my skylighting is a little bit too blue. I'll dial it back a little bit. I think it might actually be a little bit too bright. So let me just dial that in which case now I can make it a little more saturated. Pull it in. Okay, how's that? Okay, that's the sun. That is the indoor by itself. Okay. All right, and that's pretty good. That is not bad. Now you can play with it a little bit, but that's generally we've got it in the right place. Now I'm going to move my camera in a little. Bit just so that we've got a tighter view of our donut, and then again just make sure you uncheck that so that we can move around freely without it interrupting. Okay, now some of you might be wondering, how can we improve this so it doesn't look crap? Because what we are using right now, this is called the EV rendering engine, and it's the reason we've got this kind of fuzzy noise to our shadows. It's the reason we have some of our objects are not really casting much of a shadow in our scene. And it's also the reason you might notice that as you like rotate around, right, you got like, wow, look at this like bright lighting on the plane here. And watch what happens as I move the camera. Just disappears. So Eevee is a game engine. So it's doing a lot of game hackery. And that means it is due to being screen space, meaning that it's doing bounce lighting here, okay? So it's bouncing off the plane onto this wall here. However, it's only visible, it can only see what the camera sees, so it's called screen space. And that means that the moment that this moves away and we no longer have that bright light reflecting off there, it doesn't know that that plane exists and that something should bounce up there. So it can result in these like large changes of lighting. It's kind of the biggest issue if you're making animations and the camera's flying through some spaces and you don't want to have lighting kind of changing all over the place. I've got a whole video on Eevee if you want to watch that. I talk all about this and go into more detail. But, you know, these are kind of one of the biggest limitations. Now, the main thing you should be trying to do if you're using the Eevee rendering engine is the default value right here for steps is wrong. Like there's no reason it should be that low. Steps, you could think of this like accuracy. Now, if I increase this to 16, which is the maximum value, look at how much better those shadows are, right? This is the before, and then this is the after, okay? And it's even more stark here, right? Look at how much more connected that is. And then if I go back to here, look at all this extra crap, right? It's basically an accuracy amount, and it should be maxed out unless you're working on a really, really poor computer and it happens to stall it or something, you know. But even then you'd double it, at least go to 12. But that by itself will improve the look of shadows. The other thing as well is my icing. I just want to check. Okay. Oh no, that's the sprinkles. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think I said that I had the scale of my icing too high on my donut. I think a 0.03 looks good. And on my sprinkles, I'm also going to drop that. I'll make it 0.06. Nope. Let's go 0.08. So we want a little bit, this is a little bit of pass through here, but not a crazy amount, or else, yeah. And this is quite common to do, right? If you're making something, you might set a value when you're in one state of Blender, and then when you add in lighting from, a more extreme, like sunlight coming in, you start to notice that some materials actually, yeah, it doesn't look good. And so you need to adjust it. And that's a totally fine thing to do. There's not really any way around it. Now, the fuzziness, this fuzziness that you actually, yeah, it doesn't look good. And so you need to adjust it. This is quite common to do, right? If you're making something, you might a little bit, this is a little bit of pass through here. That I'll make it 0.06. Nope. Let's go 0.08. So we want a little bit, this is a little bit of pass through here. But not a crazy amount, or else, yeah. And this is quite common to do, right? If you're making something, you might set a value when you're in one state of Blender, and then when you add in lighting from, a more extreme, like sunlight coming in, you start to notice that some materials actually, yeah, it doesn't look good. And so you need to adjust it. And that's a totally fine thing to do. There's not really any way around it. Now, the fuzziness, this fuzziness that you can see right here, that is a result of the samples. So samples you can think of, I mean, it's like samples per pixel on a screen, and like basically the more samples you have, the clearer it's going to be. Now, what you're actually looking at right now is the viewport samples, which is set to 16. When you do your render, it will kick in and use this amount, which is 64. So see how fuzzy it looks there? I do my render and it comes in not so fuzzy. There is still fuzz. There's always going to be a little bit of fuzz, but at least it's not, crazy. But yeah, if you want to increase it, you can, double that or whatnot. You can have fun with that. Another thing that can improve the realism of an Eevee render is using a light probe. So as I mentioned, with the light bouncing off here, as it fluctuates around, it's kind of throwing light as it goes around. But the other issue is that, for example, it doesn't actually know that light is hitting using a crazy. But yeah, if you want to increase it, you can, double. that or whatnot. You can have fun with that. Another thing that can improve the realism of an Eevee render is using a light probe. So as I mentioned, with the light bouncing off here, as it fluctuates around, it's kind of throwing light as it goes around. But the other issue is that, for example, it doesn't actually know that light is hitting the underside of the donut here, and it would blast out in that direction because it can't see what is behind the donut right now. It also can't see like light that would be hitting the edge of this plate here and then bouncing it back this way, right? It can't see it because from where the camera is, it just can't see those objects. So if you wanted to add that, you could add in a light probe volume. So I'll show you what that looks like. First of all, I'll just shift right click on my donut just so that that's the point it comes in at. I'm going to say shift A, light probe volume. So this will cast like a grid of ping pong balls over your scene. And I say ping pong balls because I'll show you what they look like soon. But basically you want to scale this to kind of encapsulate everything you've got in the scene. And we've got way too much vertically, so I don't need all that much there. And you want the ping pong balls, these little balls, to be sitting just above the surface of the table. Again, I go into way more detail in my Eevee video, which you could watch if you were interested in this. You really want to dive into Eevee, by all means. I think I probably only need about 3. No, I'll go 4, why not? Okay, and then now that you've got this, if you hit the bake light cache, you'll see that the scene gets a little bit brighter. So this is how it looked before, and this is how it looks after. And you can improve this a lot by just like shuffling the balls around so that now I've got one ball that is going to be, let's say, let's go a little bit, oh boy, here and here. So I've got one that's going to be resting right on the edge of that plate there. And I want one inside the donut. All right, and now let's do that now. All right, and now we've got more bounce coming from there. So each of these you can think of like little lamps that are going through the scene and able to see things from the other side that the camera cannot. So it's able to break that limitation of something being screen space. And you can see that looks better. So this is with the light probe on. And then if I was to turn my probe off and do another render, so this is with it off, this is with it on, all right? So very big difference, definitely worthwhile having a light probe if that's what you're gonna use to do your render. And by the way, if you wanna visualize what they can see underneath viewport display, you can enable data, and then each of these points become little ping pong balls. That's why I think of them like that. And you can see the actual light that was captured at each one of those points, and essentially, yeah, what light it's gonna be throwing out into the rest of the scene. And the final thing that's gonna make a big difference to your final render here, and one of the big reasons that this feels like a CG computer graphics render, is that right now everything has the same amount of focus, and that is physically impossible with a real camera. There's no way to have something that doesn't have depth of field, unless you were using a pinhole camera, believe it or not. But anyways, so to get that look, to get depth of field, we're going to select our camera object in our outliner, and then down here there is a checkbox for depth of field, and ooh, already it's starting to look cool. Now you just select the object that you want to be in focus. So you click the little eyedropper tool, and then you want to click on the object. Now if you've got what I have here, you can see it's always clicking on the volume because it thinks that the volume is in front of it. But anyways, yeah, I can now just click on my icing object there, and you can see now this is the before, and then this is after. So you can see in the background there, that noisy, concrete texture that isn't relevant to the viewer is now buttery smooth. And that's a really nice way to not only make something look more realistic, but also to guide the viewer to what is important. Because that is one of the biggest problems you have as an artist, is you're giving somebody an entire image and you're trying to tell them, like, what is the important bits? Like, what should they be looking at? And they don't know if everything has just got like hyper noise and detail and color and everything. So you're trying to guide it, and that's one of the tools to do that. And one final other tip as well, because the biggest like downside to using Eevee is like the shadows just don't feel crisp enough. They don't feel like tight enough to the object. It's kind of a little bit too blurry. If you select a lamp like this one here, the sun lamp, and then you go to your shadow settings here, there is a box that says jitter, and you won't see any change in the viewport unless you were to go to your viewport settings and enable jittered shadows, but I don't think you should, because it's just, when you've got that enabled, just like every time you move it, it just jitters around and it's super annoying. But if I was to do another render now, you will see that the shadows just feel a little bit more accurate, especially in the background there, right? And essentially it's, I believe it's like rendering multiple versions of the lamp at because it's got a radius on it, a little soft radius. So enabling jitter can work a lot better for like soft lamps like what we've got here. So there you go. So that's one of the other tips. But if you want to go jitter at more accurate, especially in the background there, right? And essentially it's, I believe it's like rendering multiple versions of the lamp at because it's got a radius on it, a little soft radius. So enabling jitter can work a lot better for soft lamps like what we've got here. So there you go. So that's one of the other tips. But if you want to go very realistic and you want to avoid the light probes, you want to avoid all these settings like jitter and all this kind of thing, and you just want to make something and then just have it come out beautifully, then you should be using a different rendering engine. You should be using Cycles. Did-it-in. Now my recording has slowed down because it's using my CPU. This is cycles. Now I'll actually, I'm going to just turn that off for a sec because it's slowing down my computer. The first thing you should check if you want to use cycles, because some of you just tried that then, and much like my computer, I don't know if you can hear that, but it has started to whir up. The fans are like, whoa, this is using maximum heat, right? So first of all, go to your edit and go to preferences and then go to system. Then at the top there, you've got cycles render devices. What you want to see is if you have any graphics card on your computer that you can use to render, you should be using it. So if you've got an NVIDIA card, you would be clicking CUDA or optics. Optics is preferable. So if you've got a card that supports optics, use the optics one. HIP is for AMD cards. Open API is for Intel, I believe. And then metal, you'll see metal if you've got a Mac. In my case, I've got a Overkill RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell Workstation Edition, which I just got given to me by the kind folks at Dell. They gave me a whiz-bang Dell T2 Pro, and it's amazing. I think it costs like $20,000 or something stupid. Just the card by itself, I think, is like $15,000. It's ridiculous. It's obviously enterprise and pro level. But for the 3 people watching this that happen to own a studio, if you really want to deck it out and give artists stuff that they'll never have to worry about render times, this is the card. It is amazing. So if you've got one of those cards, use it. And then make sure here where it says device, you want to make sure instead of CPU, it is using GPU instead. And now you can see how much faster that is, right? Now, this is in 4K on my computer, and this is the size of the window here. If you want to like speed up your render, you can also just change the size of the window, right? I can drop the size of this like this, right? So it's only going to be rendering on how much it can see here, right? So as I move around, you can see it's much faster now because the size of that window is so much smaller. So that's another thing you can do if you want to be able to move around whilst it's rendering. Now, the fuzziness that you can see here, that is samples. So it's still the same term, samples, but the difference is that Cycles is a path tracer, not a rasterized engine like Eevee. So path tracing means that you don't have to deal with any probes or anything like that. It can see what is behind the donut. It can see between the sprinkles. So it's actually casting like a bounce off this sprinkle, into that one. It's also doing it on the other side of the donut that we can't see. It's actually shooting rays from the camera out into the scene, and whatever it hits, it's collecting that information. So it is much more physically accurate. It is the gold standard for rendering that computer graphics researchers use, and every movie VFX shot is generally nowadays using path tracers. It results in a way better image, but obviously you have to pay for it with render times. Now, one thing as well is this noise that you can see here. When we do our render, it's going to kick in a denoise, which is going to clear that up. But you can also enable it in your viewport. And then as you move around, you can see that it's still got like a little squiggle to it, but it is it's obviously much clearer and it's easier to see things with that on. But now that I've got that, I can do a render. It's going to load in everything. The first time you use Cycles, by the way, it might be slow, especially the first time if you use a card like an NVIDIA card or AMD or anything like that. It will be slower, but after that, it should be relatively quick. I say relatively quick. I've got the fastest card available right now, and you can see it's no longer instantaneous. It is well over 20 seconds. There we go, 23 seconds, okay? But the difference, right? Like if I go to, right, Eevee, like there is a big difference there. I mean, actually that was before I did the jitter. Actually, let's really compare apples to apples. Okay, there we go. But yeah, there definitely is a big difference, especially in the shadows, especially in the reflections. So it's a noticeable difference, but it's also a noticeable difference in the time, right? The EV1 is less than a second. The Cycles one is 23 seconds, and that's on the fastest card available. So you're going to pay for it. And this matters most when you're doing animations, because how many frames is there in 1 second of footage? Generally 24 to 30. I'm actually recording in 60 frames right now. So that would be 30 frames a second. So 30 times 23 just to get 1 second of footage. So if you're doing an animation, that's where Eevee really can speed up your workflow. But also, like, Eevee is just so much more accessible. Part of the reason I stuck to Eevee for all this tutorial up until now is that I learned from talking to people who did the previous donut that some people's renders were taking like over 20 minutes. Some people were over an hour to do one single image of the donut. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, all right, we have to use Eevee then, because there's just no way people are going to be able to finish this thing. So Eevee definitely can get a great result. It's not going to be as good as Cycles, but like I said, the times, you can't beat it. It's so much faster. So there's no shame in using it if you don't have a computer that can't do Cycles. Now, you can experiment with your lighting. You can experiment with your scene. You can add in different assets. You can change the colors, make a whole bunch of different variants. If you want to go further, you know what I'm going to say. I have released a course, and it is designed for people literally in your shoes right now that have just finished the donut and they want to know what they can do next to improve and learn more about Blender. So this course, it's called the Beginner's Academy, and it teaches you the core essential Blender skills, which is modeling, texturing, shading, lighting, camera, and rendering. And although we touched on all of those in this series, that's really just the tip of the iceberg, because there's so many different techniques to modeling. There's so many different approaches to texturing and to rendering and to lighting. And we go through all in much more detail in this course. So if you finish this donut and you want to go off and learn by yourself, there is a whole YouTube full of tutorials out there. But if you want something that is targeted, more comprehensive, and will walk you through the 80-20, the 80% of Blender's tools and techniques that you use 20% of the time, then this is the course for you. All taught by me, all taught using the latest Blender 5.0, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Otherwise, thank you for watching this entire series. If you want to join the course, you can click the link below, and hope to see you in a future video.